Hello to our audience here and online. This session is a part of the Around the World Symposium on Technology and Culture, organized by the Kuhl Institute for Advanced Studies at the University of Alberta, Canada, and with the participation over the web of academic institutes around the world. We are broadcasting our discussion on privacy and surveillance in the digital age from the University of Haifa, Israel. I am Erode. I'm with the Department of Information Systems here at the university, and I'm co-organizing this local event with Ofer Arazi, who is also one of our panelists. We also have on the panel Tal Zarsky from the Faculty of Law here at the university, Ran Wolf from Yahoo Labs, and Alan Hartman, who recently joined Afeka College after many years at IBM Research Labs. Each of our panelists has conducted research work on privacy and has his own point of view on this topic. As an opening for our discussion and further introduction of our panelists, I would like to ask each of you to give a brief statement about the particular aspects of privacy that you have investigated. Let's start with Tal.
Thank you very much, Irit, and hello to all. I've been researching privacy for over a decade, and currently I'm working on the interaction between privacy and innovation, as well as looking at governing algorithms and whether a process which is driven by information analysis is fair and efficient.
Okay, Ran?
Hi everyone. I've been studying privacy preserving data mining for about a decade now, and in recent years my conclusion is that we mainly have a conceptual problem here. We don't understand privacy, and this is what I've been trying to look at in my recent papers.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Alan Hartman, and I have not been researching privacy for quite as long as these gentlemen. My interest is mostly algorithmic in how one can, if possible, maintain privacy in large data sets. I worked on projects at IBM for protecting the privacy of people using with their health records and maintaining privacy in various contexts. My personal interest is also in how you protect the privacy of individuals and even other species. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure being part of this panel for the second year. Last year I was in Alberta. It was the first year they conducted this event, and now in Haifa. My research mostly involves online collaboration and peer-to-peer collaboration on production communities, and there we're concerned with users' desire to remain private sometimes, or remain their anonymity while sharing and contributing information. That against the desire of the other members of the community to know who the people are.
Okay, thank you. A few words about myself. I'm actually relatively new to the privacy research scene. I've joined it a couple of years ago, and I started to work with my colleagues from Tel Aviv University, Michael Biernack and Eran Toch, on a research project in the context of privacy by design. Privacy by design is an approach that essentially grants a responsibility over privacy to the designers of new technologies. And so we set out to examine what are the perceptions and what are the behaviors of information systems designers when they tackle privacy issues. What we've learned so far is that designers hold partial understanding, misconceptions many times, and attitudes that are not supportive and at times even hostile towards privacy. So if we're ever to successfully implement privacy by design, we have to find ways to change designers' state of mind on this topic of privacy. Okay, so we're talking today on privacy and surveillance in the digital age, and in this context we frequently hear about privacy invasion and violation cases. Ran, I would like to ask you to briefly describe such high-profile examples so it can be a basis for examples that we can talk about during our discussion.
Okay, so the case we selected is one that's been in the news about 2 years ago. Probably a lot of you have heard of it. 2 years ago, New York Magazine posted an article where it described, basically in my own words, how Target, which is a large retail chain in the US, learned that their teen is pregnant and then went on to inform her father about that. And it's a nice story, it's a nice case. It wraps a lot of the technology and the social issues around privacy. So I'd like to go through this case with you. It all started when Target stores decided that they want to research marketing at life-changing events. There's a small set, a couple dozen events that are noted as life-changing events, and giving birth is one of them. They called in their data mining personnel, and they found that there are some clear signals in the purchase behavior of customers for pregnancy. And the model they built could could predict at about 90% accuracy that a woman is in the beginning of her second trimester of pregnancy. Okay, so up to here we have just technology and, of course, data collection. What they did with this info is, of course, targeted advertisements. They started sending out relevant coupons to women who are predicted to be pregnant. There were coupons for baby clothes, there were coupons for baby cribs, etc. And a letter like that arrived at the house, and the father, who was not the intended recipient of the letter, opened it and came rushing into the local Target store. What are you trying to do? She's only in high school and you're sending her this coupon. Are you trying to convince her to get pregnant? Okay, so this is the story, and what went off after this broke the news is less relevant. The invasion of privacy is already done.
Okay, Ran, thank you for this example, which is, I guess, a bit frightening, but I'd like to ask you, as a follow-up for that example, we know that information is collected on all of us, all the time, constantly, and there must be some benefits from it if, we as a society allow this to continue.
Okay, so the evidence in favor of targeted ads are overwhelming. We know people love targeted ads, and we know that because they tend to click targeted ads a lot more frequently. I don't have Yahoo's number, but the figures you can get from the web are about 3 times as frequent as they click non-targeted ads. So we're not talking, of course, about whether we want to have ads at all or not, but whether we want to have targeted ads or not. The evidence there are, you cannot argue with them.
Okay, Tal, could you comment on this topic?
Just very quickly, if I understand the question is, what are the benefits, social benefits of extensive data collection? So just very quickly going through the general outline of this issue, we could see that when government collects information, so the objective could be general security, which is especially important in an age which one individual or few could cause disproportionate damage. Also, in today's age, the government has turned into a large administrative and liberal state, which carries out many objectives, and to carry out these objectives properly, correctly, and without fraud, it needs a great deal of information. Just consider welfare, providing subsidies to those that require it, and allocating resources efficiently. In terms of firms, so a few intuitions. One pointed out by Ran is when you collect a great deal of information, you're able to lower search costs, you're able to find things quicker, and people that know you need something can find you quicker. In addition, if you're able to collect information and analyze it, you're able to generate additional knowledge, and such knowledge, in theory, will also enrich society or enhance overall welfare, as an economist might say. A few last two points out of many. Collecting information allows for lowering fraud, and in that way it leads to an outcome that is fair, because it limits instances in which we must carry the weight of those carrying out fraud. It also allows for enabling new business models once information is allowed to flow. So the last metaphor, which I know is somewhat manipulative, I'll leave you with, is that when there's an intuition that infrastructure enhances innovation, so you could be thinking about highways as infrastructure for cars. You could think about IP infrastructure, which is infrastructure for ideas, or fiber, which is infrastructure for data. But also, when you allow personal information to flow, that is infrastructure for another form of data. And when you have such flow, so you have various forms of new business models, many of the new business models that we've seen flourish in the last decade in information environment.
Okay, so we have very significant benefits from collecting all this data, personal data about on all of us. And as we saw earlier, but there are also some severe risks. Alan, I would like to ask you to list a little bit about those risks that technology erodes our privacy. What are the risks here?
Well, there are several risks. One of the risks is that the people with knowledge have power, and power can be abused as well as used for good. You know, Tal was talking about all the wonderful benefits that can be obtained from the power of knowledge, but the knowledge is a two-edged sword, and somebody having knowledge that you are pregnant enables them to do invasive stuff that may be damaging to your life, including informing your father. Other areas where this may occur is if people become aware of your sexual orientation or political orientation. You know, these are certain things which, although are traditionally kept private and can be abused. I mean, you know, we only have to look back to the Holocaust, where people were targeted because they had a particular religion. This happens not only 50 years ago, 60 years ago, but right now in Burma, for example, the Muslims are being targeted by the Buddhists. You know, there are many instances of religious persecution brought about by the fact that the information is available. And a more kind of subtle use of this information would be in taking commercial advantage. If you know that a particular person is eager to buy a product, you can advertise it at a higher price. And you can take financial advantage and get economic benefits by this superior knowledge of the behavior of the person without them being aware. So there's a potential for manipulation and exploitation and persecution in this.
Ran, could you continue?
Well, I'd like to start by your last point, Alan. I think the tool we have against increasing prices is competition. So we need to keep the problem as clear as possible, and we have other mechanism which protects us against price discrimination. Regarding your question, so there are a couple of points I would like to raise. First of all, information is not always good for society. We know that we don't want everybody in the crowd, every one of the listeners, and I don't want myself, to have a recipe for a bomb. Okay, this is information, And sharing this information is not good is not necessarily good. So we have to get outside this framework of knowing more is better for everyone. We need to clarify exactly where people get hurt as a result of additional information. We have an example here of a girl that was hurt because her father prematurely discovered something she didn't want him to know yet. Okay, so I think the real risks we see today in the internet arena is that technology is eroding privacy norms, and more than that, it erodes mechanisms which we used to rely on for enforcing those norms. And I think we must find out which mechanisms are under attack, and we have to find out which norms we want to preserve and at what cost.
The context that Alan and Ran spoke about refers to the consumer and a marketer relationship. I'm more interested in online communities and the peer-to-peer relationships, but many of the concerns that Alan has alluded to are very relevant in that setting as well. And the danger is not so much persecution, but it's sanctioning by the community. So people often want to remain anonymous. I mean, if you share information, you might expose incompetencies. I mean, you're writing something that you don't know about, so maybe you don't want. Maybe the views and opinions that you have do not conform with the views of others in the community. So there are reasons why people want to remain anonymous in those settings as well.
Mm-hmm.
Can I make one more point about the dangers? And this is a kind of curiosity. If we could show the other slide now, the dangers of too much information can be have a strange side effect. If you take a photograph in a safari park in Africa of a rhinoceros with location information, this can make poachers aware of where the herds are, and there's a warning sign. I don't know if you can't see it. There's a warning sign in a safari park saying, when you take photos of wildlife here, turn off your location in the photos and don't post them on Facebook, please, because it's a danger to the animals. So it's not only humans that need privacy, also rhinoceroses.
Other species, as you said before.
Other species.
Tal, if you could give us your more legal point of view.
So I'm just repeating the original question, which, as I recall, was how technology might erode privacy. So I'll talk about quickly 3 points. One would be that in many instances, the extent to which the law protects privacy is our subjective expectation of privacy and an objective expectation of privacy, right? So what the world thinks is acceptable and what we render acceptable. Now, what technology does, and this is building upon what Ran and Avner said, is it changes our expectation of privacy, and in that way, slowly, it changes the norms in society. So this is something that was repeated. I just wanted to articulate it and maybe give a quick example. There was a famous case in the U.S. Supreme Court that also, there was a similar case in the Canadian Supreme Court, so many of the viewers might recognize it, which is the Kylo case, which talked about viewing inside people's houses using infrared cameras. So the idea is that the court found that unacceptable search by both governments. But the question is, how would we view that today? How intrusive is an infrared camera when you could now go to a pharmacy and buy a thermometer that I could look at Irit like this and know her temperature? And also some governments and countries, when they see people in, they apply these cameras and look at people coming in and say he might have the flu, let's put him aside. So here, this is a very simple technology to see, an example to see how technology might be eroding our standard. So since I'm running a bit long, I'll just point out another point, which is Another main premise in the law of privacy protection is consent, which is if we provide our information so we don't have an expectation of privacy in it. But technology blurs the consent we're giving because we can't really understand the information we're giving and the knowledge that could be derived of it. So I'll give an example, which is the one we gave before. So how did Target know that this young woman was in her third or second trimester? It was based on things she purchased and taking out a loyalty card and signing an agreement which said Target may use information based upon previous purchases to provide me with appropriate offers. Now, did she understand by the fact that she stopped purchasing alcohol and began purchasing bananas, which is actually the facts of the situation, that she was signaling to Target and its affiliates her physical situation of pregnancy? The answer is clearly no. But she signed a document. So this entire understanding of consent is coming under attack because of the greater ability to collect information, aggregate information, analyze information, and apply it directly to individuals.
Okay. Before we go on with our discussion, I would like to ask if there's one question in the audience. You may have some time to take it to one or more of the panelists. Okay. Then we'll give another chance again after the next topic. So we see that we clearly have benefits, but we have severe risks in the technologies of data collection and analysis. And what's also important to look at is that we have very different points of view that look at these benefits and risks. So we have the individuals, the private people. We have industry and governance that constantly collect information about us. And we have the society as a whole. And I would like to take a few minutes to dedicate to each of these points of view, starting with the individual. Ofer, if you could start.
Okay, so I'll take you back to the context that I'm interested in, and that is online communities or online production communities, when people come together and they actually try to build something. And one of the key to success is people talk about the wisdom of the crowds, so the ability to collect different pieces of information and viewpoints from the diverse crowd. And if you want to collect that much information, then you should lower the the barriers to entry. And one such barrier is the requirements to identify yourself. So if, for example, in Wikipedia, I'm looking to get as many viewpoints as possible, I may allow people to contribute and participate without revealing their identity. Now, that goes against the requirement or the desire for accountability. If we're producing a product and a person is contributing a piece, I want to know that it's reliable, and for that I need to know who the person is, right? If I allow anybody to make a contribution, I don't know who he is, then we're in trouble, right? So there's a trade-off between the notion of accountability and anonymity. And when we get to at the very end, I think you want to talk about some technological solutions that deal with that. I'll get to that at the later time.
Okay, Ran, individual.
Well, I think the point about privacy is that it's not really an individual right. It's a social right. I think a lot of the unclarity we have about privacy is because we're looking at it from the point of view of the individual. And we really want to ask ourselves, which kind of information do we as a society want to keep secret, to keep private? Okay, pregnancy. We want to allow a woman to tell her family that she is pregnant. Okay, and we don't want to live in a society where this information, this choice is taken out of our hands. So my point with respect to individuals is the wrong focus in terms of privacy.
Okay. Yeah?
I mean, it's interesting. I had a class back in Canada, and we talked about privacy, and we're looking at some of the data collection technologies. It was the Google toolbar, and we looked at the privacy statements. people are very much aware of the risks, and I had a long debate, but when we asked them, would you give this information just so you can get some personalized ads or personalized interface, everybody, or 95% raised their hand. So we talk about users' concern, but it seems that when it comes to making an action, people put a very low price on those risks.
Which is yet another reason why we don't want to leave these choices to individuals. These are social choices.
I couldn't agree more. So let's talk now about the point of view of the industry and the government, the bodies that actually collect and analyze the data. Alan.
Well, I mean, one of the chief concerns at a company like IBM is the fear of being prosecuted. I mean, they are terribly worried about exposing themselves to private information, and as a result, they restrict their activities in a number of areas. They are defensive to the point of lack of effectiveness due to their desire to preserve what is seen to be privacy. Particularly in the area of, say, healthcare records, where there was an attempt by Google to run Google Health, which had to be completely cancelled because of the issues of the privacy of the data. And there could have been huge benefits from using this data in an aggregated form, in an appropriately anonymized way, but the aggregated data regarding healthcare was regarded as too sensitive, and so industry and the government and the good guys couldn't really use this information in a way that was beneficial to society for fear of treading on people's toes. There's the lawyers in the company, in the organization, make life difficult. On the other hand, by the same token, a company like IBM also introduces very privacy-invasive technology when it wants to sell to retailers. They have this product called presence zones, which allows the owner of a retail store to know exactly where the customers are and what they're looking at and how their feet trace around the store. They can, offer a privacy-invasive technology if they're going to make money out of it. So that there's, a dual aspect to the industry attitude. On the one hand, they're petrified of legal issues, but if they feel confident enough about the legal issues, they'll violate your privacy like nobody else.
So maybe we hear first about the legal issues and then go ahead to other aspects.
Right, so there are many points to make here, but I think I'll just make two based on previous discussions. So we were talking about the motivations of industry to collect information or abide by privacy. So because we heard a great deal from Ofer about these social networks, I wanted to make a point which isn't intuitive. Regarding the information, a firm that runs a social network actually has insight to, which isn't always obvious. And the fact is that if you're running a social network, what you actually could see is the articulation of a social graph. You could see who's talking to who, when, why, from where. And if you're a sociologist, from this you could structure a social network. You could figure out who is the supernode, who is influential. You could figure out even many identity traits of individuals, even if they're hiding it. If you have many forms of friends from a certain ethnicity or sexual orientation, that says something about yourself. So that's what they say, tell us who your friends are and we'll tell you who you are. But this is actually a reality. So these firms actually have a very strong incentive to collect information, and other firms have great motivation to learn this information, because that way they could know who is influential and who isn't, treat these people differently, and understand what society looks like. And that's greatly beneficial to marketers. That's greatly beneficial beneficial to politicians running for office, and this was a big deal in the last U.S. election. Okay, so this is where the interests of firms are. And the second point is building upon what Alan said. So it's quite unclear how firms will react to privacy risks. On its face, a firm should be protective of privacy in many instances because it understands that individuals are sensitive to this issue, okay? But 2 points. First of all, in many instances, as Ofer mentioned, individuals are easily tricked into providing additional information they don't correctly understand. And for that reason, because of this cognitive and market failure, we probably cannot trust firms to make appropriate decisions. And a second point would be that even if the firm has all this information in its hands, at times its managers make these errors on its own, because managers, recent research shows us, are subject to the same errors that customers make. So they might be tempted to breach privacy, even if they understand at one point, if they logically would have looked at it, that this will not end out in a good way for them, but the very quick and sure profit they could make in the short run is convincing them to make this error. And also this leads to Ran's point that at many instances markets can't be trusted and we need some regulation.
Ofer, could you take the topic of social networks and comment about that?
I mean, I was talking mostly about, the peer-to-peer relationships and why we want to know about other people. But I am in complete agreement with Tal that the people that own the network gain a lot of power and they use it for marketing. Facebook, like Google, has become a marketing company. Right? So, I mean, the risks are there, and I'm not sure that we're in good hands in terms of, I think there's too much information collected about us in those settings, for sure.
Okay, and going to the society as a whole, I would like to ask you, Ran, to start commenting on that.
So, as I said in the introduction, I think this new era of big data really challenges us as a society to clarify the protections we want to provide to individuals, specifically if they are at risk or not as strong as we wish they were. And the real you see, technology progresses. It progresses all the time. And this is not something new. And every such progress erodes mechanisms which were installed in decades to protect all kinds of interest. And this is not a new situation. The car did that. The phone did that. Okay, and now big data does that, and it's not very new. And we're challenged once more to show what kind of rights we want to give individuals with respect to their personality, their behavior. Do we want to guarantee the privacy in your own house? Okay, Tal raised that question. I think we do. Okay, technology eroded the mechanism of a brick wall. A brick wall was a great mechanism which provided privacy in one's house. Okay, technology made it translucent. Okay, what do we want to do about it? Okay, do we want to punish anybody who views somebody in his in the privacy of his home? We can do that. We have the power. We just need to have the will. Okay, I think this is the main challenge here. I think we actually call upon our lawyers or academicians in the law, in the area of law, to list these protections and talk with folks from the side of technology like myself and see which of these mechanisms are today eroded and what should and can be done about that. Okay, but the challenge is not, you see, we technology folks are doing our work. We're inventing things, we're analyzing data, we're learning a lot of things, and we call upon society to clarify its end of the equation.
Tal?
So we're trying, I guess, to figure out what society thinks about privacy. I don't have a clear answer for this, so I'll just leave you with a worry I have. So, in general, we started out with the point saying that people, there's a disparity between the way they reflect their privacy preference in words and in actions. Okay, so how do we understand this disparity? So one way to understand it, or maybe I'll explain it again, when we ask people how they value their privacy, it's very high up, and then quickly they turn around and do things that indicate quite the other way. So one way to explain it is that people are actually lying, which is they're lying mostly to themselves because it sounds nice. It sounds nice to be protective of privacy, but that's not really their set of preferences. So that's one answer. Another answer would be people actually have this set of norms, but they make various errors, or they're seduced into making these errors, and that's why they act in this way. And the third answer might be is that people behave differently when they act as citizens and as consumers. When they're citizens, they go and they vote and they reflect their preferences. And when they're consumers, they're in a different mindset. Okay, and we see these disparities across the board, right? In some instances, we vote, we want more equality, and we want greater speech, but then we turn around and do different things when we're consuming. And as a society, we have to step in and assure that we structure laws in the ways that are according to the preferences as people reflected them in the ballot box as opposed to as customers. Now, all that is nice and good, but I'm concerned with another issue, which is in some instances law might react paternalistically and overprotect privacy, and that could lead to vast problems. First of all, it's an autonomy problem that the law is moving in and limiting the autonomy of individuals, even though that's not a reflection of their preferences. And even worse than that, law might be limiting innovation and the benefits coming with that. And the worst outcome of all is that in many instances in law, when it's moving in a paternalistic move to protect privacy, which is not backed up by actual preferences, is actually guided, the law is guided by the interests of interested parties. So every party that we see that is pro-privacy, every politician that might be saying that he's pro-privacy might be listening to a lobbyist talking in his ear based on specific interests that align with that. So that's a point where we have to be careful when we're setting up norms that aren't in compliance with the preferences as reflected in the market. So I'm worried about that as well.
Yeah.
If we go back to the OECD principles about data privacy, I think one of the reasons they were installed in the first place is to avert protectionism. Okay, so we want to remember that. I fully agree with what Tal says.
I mean, I think we really need to be a bit careful about this issue. You know, we're in a world where my privacy is not the same as your privacy, and the privacy of my millennial children is definitely not the same as my privacy. You know, we have a generation gap here, and we have a cultural gap. I mean, the brick walls of the United States are all very well, but people in Holland sit on the street with their windows open. You know, there's a huge issue here, and one of the main problems with the issue that I see is that people have local norms, but the companies and the societies are global. And Google is a multinational company that is required to preserve the privacy of all its customers, and perhaps it should work to the lowest common denominator and obey what the EU says, whereas the people in India and Pakistan may not give a damn. Privacy is essentially a problem of the wealthy countries and the developed world. It's not something that really bothers people in Pakistan or in India. So, I'm really confused as to, going back to the very beginning where Ofer says, how do we define privacy? And I don't think that there is a good definition. I really don't. It's so, individual-based. My privacy is not yours.
Perhaps culture-based.
It's a cultural thing, and it's a very complicated issue. And I haven't made life clearer for anybody. I've just indicated my own confusion.
I think it's almost like we were asked to begin to summarize. So we looked at a trade-off between the benefits and risks to society, and my personal standpoint is that I see the risks much larger, and I think there is a need to control privacy. Following up on what Ron said, that needs to be at the society level. People don't really understand the risks, and we said that everything that we do, we leave digital footprints. Right? It used to be just from working on your desktop and then you go somewhere else and nobody knows what you're doing. But now we're carrying these devices and we're talking about wearable computing and so on. So information is collected about us at magnitude, scale. I don't think we really understand and comprehend. Users cannot really see all the implications, and the potential for harm for this data being in their own hands is huge. And I think there's a place for lawmakers and the governing bodies to, step in. They are, by nature, always a few steps behind technology because technology moves so fast. But I think there's definitely a need for some governing at the societal level.
From the audience? I guess the camera is very intimidating. Oh, yes, we have a question.
You all talk that privacy should be a societal concern and not a personal agenda. And I was wondering, if it's a societal concern, how do you reconcile that with personal consent? I mean, what is the granularity where you can give consent?
Tal already spoke about consent. I think there are multiple evidence that the current consent framework is totally broken. And I think we have to move beyond consent. We have to move towards specific protections.
I think the key issue is that consent is supposed to be informed consent, and the majority of the world is not informed about what they're consenting to because of the implications of big data and analytics and all the stuff that can be gleaned from stuff that you think doesn't expose you. So that, like Ron said, the consent issue is broken because it's no longer informed consent; it's uninformed.
But it's still needed, so we have to create a new agenda for consent. Otherwise,
Well, consent is a mechanism. If it's broken, you simply need a new mechanism, a different mechanism.
So I think thank you for the question. I think there are two ways to perhaps approach it. One way is to say that consent is broken, and many people talked about that. Another point would be is that consent is insufficient. And the reason would be is that even though you do not consent to any collection, you could be extremely affected by the process. So like a very simple example would be someone that has an identical twin, but didn't provide any information at all and didn't consent to anything. but has a twin that's very active in the digital world, and even, let's say, has a Facebook page. Now, said first twin, privacy hater twin, goes on Facebook and uploads a photo. So the system automatically, using the face recognition, would understand that this is someone that's related to the previous individual, and therefore allow everyone to make inferences from the first person to the second person. Now, given the fact that by nature they have the same DNA, those inferences will be very powerful. Okay, so I mean, not only will you know this person's age, so that's very easy, and birthday, which is very significant, like to cracking your questions and codes. So they also know all the security questions that this first twin has. You know them from the other lenient twin. But all the inferences made about potential medical predispositions also could be inferred. Okay, so in this aspect, we see that there's a problem with consent, because this individual, the first individual, gave no consent at all, but still is subjected to all this mechanism we talked about. Doesn't always work, right? In the target case, so the inference of, pregnancy doesn't work. Okay, but that's also problematic, because there will be mistakes. Maybe this first twin will start getting all the records from the sister that is pregnant. So that's another problem. So we see many problems that all come from this big data environment where consent is very limited tool, and law has to come and probably introduce another set of solutions.
Just very shortly. In the era of big data, we all have identical twins. If you're 1 in a million, there's 1,000 like you, and we are all. The consent of these 1,000 is sufficient to understand our behavior.
Consent is sometimes not sufficient. Society has a responsibility to protect you, even if you don't think that you want to be protected. If you want to take some risks, I mean, there's laws against smoking. You can go and say, I want to smoke in a room. We're doing certain actions that might not put anybody else in danger except yourself. And even if you're willing, society will step in and say, well, you know what, this is illegal.
This is why I asked that granularity. You're saying a person doesn't have enough information to make an informed consent, but a country does, maybe. So what's the granularity that you think you would go to? If the person is not enough, but a country is enough, where does it stop?
I leave the question hanging. I don't think there's a good answer to that. But.
So we'll leave this question open, and
I could maybe give
Just a quick example of this issue. So there were instances in which groups were approached with this issue, especially in genetic testing. So there are some insular groups that were subjected to genetic testing, where clearly you can make an inference about a specific individual. So this happened with some Native American tribes. It also happened, for instance, with Ashkenazi Jews, which is a very insular group. And when these studies, genetic studies, started, so not only did they talk to the individual, but they tried to make decisions in both of these groups and talk to potential tribunals to make these decisions. So I think this answers to your granularity question, but of course it's a very difficult one.
Okay, so looking forward, and how we can try to mitigate at least some of the risk, I would like to dedicate the last minutes that we have left to strategies for protecting privacy. Alan.
Well, I mean, we worked along with some members of the audience here on algorithms for anonymization of large data sets. And the conclusion that I came to is that actually it doesn't work. Many people have tried to do anonymization, and if the opponent, if the person who is trying to gather the information has enough time and enough resources, no anonymization is big enough to deal with that. And if the government or the security services really want to find something out, they can. The idea of the anonymization algorithms and the sorts of technologies that we were working on is to make it harder, to raise the price. And that's all we can do. We can't actually guarantee anonymization. All we can do is, to some extent, raise the price and make it harder. But we can't do it technologically at all.
Well, I agree that anonymity is another mechanism which is broken. I think Paul Ohm wrote about it, and it should be well acknowledged by now. And again, I've been studying these mechanisms for quite a long time. My personal belief is that we have to move beyond privacy assuring mechanisms and into privacy guarantees and specific protections at the societal level. If you had told Target, no, you cannot trace pregnant women, it's illegal, Target would simply not have done that.
Tal?
So I know there are two topics that my colleagues want to talk about, which is two acronyms that start with P. Maybe they want to focus on the first. One is privacy by design, and the other one is privacy impact assessments. So these are the two hot solutions, both in the EU and other countries, especially for Canadian audiences. Anne Kavokian, Privacy Commissioner for Ontario, was an early adapter to and individual that mentioned this solution. So I think that, I'll say quickly something, that the privacy impact assessment, the idea is that when work on a technology, both in government and industry, that will have privacy implications. So you run an assessment trying to figure out what the privacy implications are. This actually sounds like a pretty good idea because so the question is, how evil are companies? Yes, in many instances, companies aren't really evil, but they roll into these solutions and they don't think them all the way through. But if you stop at an early point and bring people together and have a thought process of how this might impact privacy, and let's see if we could do this differently, that in itself has interesting benefits, and when this process is made transparent, even more so. Another tool is privacy by design, and because I know my colleagues want to talk about it, so maybe I'll come back and talk about it a bit
Okay,
later.
we don't have much time,
Okay.
but
The expert is
I have a microphone, thank you. So just a few words about privacy by design. The idea in this is that once we acknowledge that technologies erode our privacy, and then we try to find all kinds of solutions to put on those technologies in order to regain control over our privacy, privacy by design actually preaches for designing these technologies from the start to not invade our privacy, or at least to have a very good protection for our preferences on this matter. And as I said earlier, this means that now designers would be responsible for privacy rather than what is usually done today, more the security department in the IT firm or software organization. And so my prospect for the future would be, not mine, I have, there are bigger names around this topic, that designers would understand deeply this concepts of privacy, would respect it a little more than they do today, and would be able to design those technologies not to invade privacy. Having said that, of course, we have another player in the game, which are the businesses and the government that are not always of interest, as Tal said before, to preserve our privacy. So even if the designer knows what to do, it doesn't mean that they'll have the permission to do that.
I mean, I would just like to add one other thing, is that privacy by design is a set of principles. It's not a recipe for building an application. And the people who are responsible, these designers that you mentioned, are engineers. They're not sociologists, and they're not psychologists, and they're not legal people. And I'm not sure that they have the tools to do privacy by design on their own. The issue is that it's a multidisciplinary thing, and companies are very bad at doing multidisciplinary work. But design is a principle that's being adopted in various parts of the industry, and it's becoming much more important. So that the word design is a catchphrase now for, you know, interdisciplinary collaboration on design that includes engineers and sociologists and psychologists and legal people. And if those can all work together, then there is some hope for the world. But in the current, you know, compartmentalized world of industry, it's a dead horse in the water.
And designers repeatedly refer to this issue, saying that they sometimes say it's a philosophy issue or a social issue. It's not something that we should know, not even that we know, but that we should know how to handle.
So we came back to our hosts, which are the Information Systems Department. And I think privacy is the perfect storm for the Information Systems Department. This is what this multidimensional, multidisciplinary area of the science is about. And if research should be done in academy about privacy, if education of engineers could be done in academy towards privacy, then we're looking to the Information Science Department here at Haifa and worldwide to educate us.
It's a big role.
Amen.
Okay, so yes.
Just a final, somewhat skeptic point. So educating engineers about privacy, who could, debate about that? That sounds nice. And take things off the equation, that's good. But privacy by design is far more than that. It's a potential legal requirement, especially according to the proposed EU regulation. And I worry about this. I'm worried about having laws require technologists impede on their innovation based on what they might think the law would be. So many say that privacy by design could actually enhance innovation because we'll see technology moving in a privacy-protected trajectory. But I'm worried that when taking upon themselves this move and shifting in this direction, they're going to be abandoning many other important business models which they would be pursuing if they wouldn't have had this privacy by design requirement over their heads. So perhaps, engineers should be doing their jobs and lawyers should be doing their jobs after the fact. So I'm a bit worried about this legal concept as opposed to educational concept of privacy by design.
And so thank you. That's a happy, somewhat happy note, somewhat puzzling, but there's still a lot to discuss and reflect upon, which I'm sure the rest of the symposium will also continue to discuss. Our time is coming to an end. I would like to thank the Kiel Institute for organizing this symposium. Thank you very, very much, all our panelists, for this interesting discussion. And thank you all for coming, and goodbye.